Before we really get into discussing the brand new Tier 8 French supercruiser Carnot in great detail, I feel like I need to give you a little bit of a disclaimer. When the update dropped on Monday and I first got my hands on this ship, I felt it was kind of mediocre, and I wasn't sure if that was because the ship is actually mediocre or because I only felt that way due to a skill issue on my part. The latter is always something that comes into my mind whenever I get a new ship and I can't make it work the way I want it to work. I think, is that because the ship is bad, or is that because I am bad at playing the ship? A great question for everybody to ask themselves when they have a poor experience in a new ship. It might not be the ship, it might just be you. And after thinking about that for a while, I came to the conclusion that it probably was me, and the Carnot is better than I initially thought. I don't think it's going to be winning any awards for Best Campaign Ship of the Year or anything like that, but it's certainly a solid cruiser and unique amongst the other super heavy cruisers like the Alaska, the Yoshino, the Siegfried, I suppose. It's sort of like that. It's got 305 millimeter guns like the Alaska, Azuma, even the Odin, but it has 10 305 millimeter guns rather than 9 because 2 of the turrets have triple barrels and one of them has quad barrels. So that's 10 305 millimeter guns, basically battleship sized guns. And of course the ship is French. And as we all know, French AP tends to have absolutely crazy penetration. So I was expecting great things out of this French AP, but I wasn't particularly getting it. That's not to say that the AP is bad. Maybe I was just playing it and I had some bum shots, but to me, it feels like this AP shatters at times when it really shouldn't shatter. For example, I had this Carnot facing a Republique, and he was maybe 8 to 10 kilometers away from me, flat broadside. I aimed at him, and the AP did fantastic work against the 32 millimeter upper belt armor of that ship, which isn't surprising. Basically anything should be able to do that to the 32 millimeter plating of Republique. Anything should be able to penetrate that if it's flat broadside. But the problem was if I aimed a little bit lower and these guns hit the Republique's belt armor. In that case, I simply landed 6 shells against the belt armor and received 6 shatters. Now, I don't know. That was on the Republique in particular. I'm not sure what the value of its particular belt armor is, but I feel like a cruiser with 305 millimeter guns should be able to penetrate that belt armor at 8 to 10 kilometers. I feel like if I had been in the Azuma, the Yoshino, or the Alaska, it probably would have been able to do it, but this one simply did not. And I've seen more shatters than I would expect when shooting at broadside battleships of all descriptions with this AP. Nevertheless, when it does penetrate and it hits, it can be absolutely devastating. Then there's the HE, which is pretty good. I mean, it's got great pen, being 305 millimeters, and it's got a fire chance in the 20 percentile range, I think 23%, which is good. You could certainly use the HE to start fires left and right and burn people down, and maybe that is the more optimal way to play this ship, switching between the HE and the AP when the situation calls for it, because as you can see there, against the Azerlane, New Jersey, we only get 2 shells, but that was like 5k, and the AP can do good things against battleships. I think all in all, on that New Jersey with that salvo we did, that was almost 10k in damage, maybe something like 9. So that's pretty good, right? But there is one major problem with these guns, 2 actually. One is that the base turret traverse speed is pretty slow. 30 millimeters, or not 30 millimeters, 30 seconds. That's a long time, especially if you're going to be using the main battery reload mod in the 4th slot, which increases the turret traverse speed time by 12%. Then you're looking at 36, 37 seconds, and that is an awfully long time to get these turrets on target. Really cuts down on the DPM, really. So the solution to that, what is it? Well, I decided I would be using the range mod instead of the reload mod. Gives you a 5% extra range, of course, and tightens up the dispersion a little bit, which certainly doesn't hurt. But then, if you take the range mod instead of reload, you're saddled with a whole 25-second reload on these 10 305mm guns, and that feels pretty bad, especially if you need to be switching between the AP and the HE all the time. But the great part about this ship, really, the major highlight, I would say, is its ridiculous speed. I mean, look at the size of this thing. It's practically a battleship, and without the engine boost consumable active, we hit about 35, 36 knots base. With the engine boost active, it pushes the speed of this thing well over 40 knots, which is absolutely insane, and also quite useful for repositioning. Plus, the Carnot's armor is actually pretty good. The Citadel is hittable, for sure, and the bow and stern plating is 25mm, so it can be overmatched, but it's very small bow and stern plating. It really only goes from the tip of the bow to like the very first turret, and the maybe like half of the way up to the turret on the back of the bow. It's very tiny 25mm plating, and then the rest of the plating down the sides is 30mm, which is fantastic. You can angle that against every battleship caliber in this game, aside from that found on things like the Georgia, the Republique, the Musashi, and the Yamato. Those can all overmatch Carnot's broadside armor, but nothing else can, and so the ship is very tanky. Plus, it's very fast, and you can play it as sort of a long-range kiting cruiser, and you can also push in very quickly and reposition when the situation calls for it. So all in all, because of that speed and the raw firepower on the guns when they behave correctly, which I don't think is all the time, to be fair, this is a pretty solid Tier 8 super cruiser. It's not my favorite, to be sure, and to be totally objective and fair about myself and my abilities at this game, I don't think these kind of super heavy cruisers are really my forte. They're not so much my thing, and it could be a little bit of a skill issue on my part. Maybe I'm just not as good at playing these kind of ships as I am other kinds. So it could be that. But would I recommend it? I mean, I suppose so. It's a unique ship, and I think the campaigns are always good deals. 2,500 doubloons for the Admiralty backing to grind out the campaign over the duration of the update, and at the end, you get one of the highest tier premium ships in the game. Personally, this one is... I mean, I could go either way on it. I could see myself skipping it and not picking the ship up, or I could see myself completing it and taking the ship. I don't know how often I would be playing the Carnot, though, and that may just come down to a matter of personal taste. Just because it's not necessarily my cup of tea doesn't mean it's a bad ship, and doesn't mean you wouldn't enjoy it if you bought the Admiralty backing and completed the campaign. So, I don't know. I think this one is kind of a mixed bag. In some ways, I think it's a little bit of a filler ship to put in a campaign until they move on to something a little bit more interesting. And that's really all I have to say about the Carnot itself. I want to take these last 6 minutes, though, to address what's gone on in this game. It's actually a very competitive game, which is the reason I chose this footage for my sort of review on the Carnot, because this was played the day of or the day after the update, and as you all know, the quality of gameplay whenever updates drop tends to drop in tandem with the update, if you know what I mean. People do not necessarily play well. But my team has managed to take both Bravo and Charlie, so we've secured the win conditions. We now just have to protect them. A Drake is pushing in to Bravo, where he's getting into a fight with... Is that my last remaining battleship teammate? No, I've got 3 of them. That's one of my 3 last remaining battleship teammates, who appears to just be sort of sitting there, bow into the Drake, And the Drake, I don't actually have it, but I think the side armor on that thing is good enough to occasionally bounce battleship caliber AP. Plus, it's British and has a super heal. So this guy is running circles around the Lenin, torpedoing him. Wasn't exactly sure what was going to happen here, but in his maneuvering, he's turning broadside to me. So there we get sort of an example of Carnot's AP being okay, but not actually striking a citadel. And it turns out that the Drake's maneuver isn't going to be enough to take down the Lenin. In fact, I think the Lenin secondaries take him out for a close quarters expert. But it's still 4v4, and the enemy team has a destroyer left, which is a worrying prospect. The destroyer was spotted north of Alpha. I don't really know what it is, but there's a Kansas sort of between Alpha and Bravo. There's a Cleveland over there parked behind that island, who very well may go dark. He's at 17 kilometers, by the way. We predict he's going to start reversing. We fire the shot, and the results are that our prediction was more or less right on, although we don't get any citadels, just 2 regular pens and 2 overpens. Still, fair amount of damage to the Cleveland. He's not really going to be shaking that off too easily, and he reverses behind the island. But I'm still spotted. Could be the Kansas between the gap in between those islands, or it could be the destroyer. And there, by the way, there's an example of a great hit against the Kansas. Nearly 9,000 damage into his superstructure. It does go to show that the AP can be effective. I just don't think it is as consistent as it could be, and it doesn't seem to have that super spicy French flavor to it, where it just does crazy things with the penetration. Then again, maybe I just haven't seen that yet. In any case, we're still spotted, so that means the destroyer has line of sight on us, and there's a République out there at full health who can overmatch our broadside armor, to say nothing of our bow, so we can't allow ourselves to be focused by him. But there, fantastic salvo against the République's upper belt armor, 10,000 damage. That's when these guns are singing, but I promise you, it's not as consistent as I would like it to be. We managed to avoid the torpedoes from the enemy destroyer, and we put ourselves behind this island so that he's not able to torpedo us any further, and the Kansas and the République can't shoot at us. Now, we're at 700 some points to 500 some points, a little bit over 100 points difference, and the Kansas is broadside to me. So I figure we can secure this kill, and we do. Kansas overmatches our bow, of course, but it's not enough to citadel us, and we're able to reverse away. The République can't hit us. We've done 120,000 damage, and the Kansas's death has basically secured the win, provided that neither of my remaining 2 teammates perish. The destroyer is the big concern in my mind right now. It could be anywhere. It's most likely in front of this island. It could be as close as the cap, and it may be trying to YOLO me. So I need to get out of here. I don't really want to be spotted by the République, but then I get spotted by the destroyer, so I know he's got line of sight on me. Take a shot at the République, kick it forward, got the speed boost active, and there's the destroyer. Not quite YOLOing me. In fact, he's not coming this way at all, and he's got basically no health. But I'm thinking torpedoes were probably launched, so we're kicking it back to full reverse as we approach the island. We don't want to stay here, though, because the République is quite fast, and theoretically it could charge around this island and sink me before the game ends, which would most likely result in my demise. I notice at some point, by the way, the friendly Lenin inside of the Bravo cap, and I think he's going toward the République and destroyer. So I think I ping him to get back, but ultimately he doesn't push out and he keeps himself alive. There I ping him to get back, because I don't want him going out in front of that République and getting dev struck in the broadside. But he says Roger, he pulls back a little bit. He recognizes that we're going to win and we don't need to pull back. I honestly probably don't need to pull around this corner. I was just worried the République was going to be able to get me. Destroyer appears, and as a last-ditch effort, well, it doesn't amount to much. We take him out with like a single shell, and that basically seals the win. The République and the Cleveland don't have enough time to sink us, and so we end the game with 125,000 damage done, and a victory in what was a pretty refreshing competitive game that was sort of anybody's all the way right up till the end. And that's nice to see. That's something I haven't been seeing lately, so I'm glad to be able to show you it. I hope you enjoyed this look at the Carnot. Let me know what you think about the ship in the comments, because frankly, I'm still sort of undecided on it. Give the video a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.